The events in question occurred in approximately 1998, give or take a year. At the time, I was approximately 22 years of age and had been in a relationship with an individual whom I found to be exceptionally attractive, intelligent, and amusing. As a result, I was deeply infatuated with her. Despite the age difference of approximately 1 year, I was still in a relationship with her, although she was still living with her father, who had a number of rules in place for her, including a curfew, despite her age being 21. It was somewhat incongruous that he regarded her as an innocent, given that she was not entirely inexperienced in matters of the heart, despite her father's disapproval. We continued our relationship, but it became increasingly challenging due to the necessity of clandestine meetings. She would frequently cite her cousin as an excuse to see me, but in reality, she would spend time at his residence to create an alibi. She asserted that they had a close bond since childhood, which made it seem normal to her as time went on. I subsequently discovered that the individual in question was not, in fact, her cousin. Rather, he was the son of her father's best friend. She explained that she had always referred to him as a cousin and considered him like family. However, I began to observe a growing number of peculiar incidents, which led me to become highly suspicious. She informed me that she was going to have lunch at a specific restaurant and then come to my place shortly afterwards. I subsequently received a message on my pager requesting that I meet at Red Lobster at 12. Subsequently, I received another message that clarified the initial one was actually meant for her father. I promptly proceeded to the restaurant and observed her vehicle, subsequently parking at a considerable distance. Another vehicle arrived and her purported cousin exited. They exchanged greetings in the form of embraces and kisses before entering the establishment. I then returned home, where I allowed myself to dwell on my distress. I proceeded to cancel our scheduled engagement for that day but did not inform her of my discoveries. In due course, I devised a cunning plan. Allow me to recount an incident that occurred at an earlier point in our relationship. On one occasion, while she was preparing for the day, I took a Polaroid photograph of her posterior. I had presumed she would not object, given the lack of identifying features in the image. However, she became enraged. I had never observed her in such a state of fury. She was determined to retain possession of the photograph, but I made no attempt to dissuade her. She attempted to destroy it, but was unable to do so. I requested that she relinquish the photograph so that I could disassemble it. She procured a pen and began marking the photograph, then proceeded to locate scissors and cut it into. Ultimately, I incinerated the remaining fragments in her presence. She remained visibly distressed for an extended period, repeatedly asserting her vehement disinclination towards the notion of having any explicit images of herself in circulation. It is imperative to emphasize the extent of her aversion towards the prospect of anyone possessing photographs of her. The incident caused significant distress, resulting in a prolonged period of silence and a near breakdown in our relationship. However, she eventually came to recognize that I had not anticipated that it would cause her distress and that I would refrain from attempting anything similar again. I proceeded to devise a plan and made arrangements for her to visit my residence. I was renting a house with my closest friend, but my room was sparsely furnished. It included a bed, a computer table with a chair, a dresser, and an alarm clock on the floor next to my bed. I proceeded to the kitchen and retrieved an additional item. I then positioned the chair at the end of my bed and placed another alarm clock on it. My intention was to make it obviously seem out of place. She came over and we engaged in close physical contact. I remained calm and continued this arrangement for another couple of weeks, engaging in close physical contact 3 times per week. I made sure to explore different positions and angles, positioning her in a way that the alarm clock was directly in her line of sight. I wanted to prolong this situation, but eventually decided that it had gone on long enough. On our last day together, just before we left, I unplugged the clock, placed it next to my computer, and moved the chair to a different room. I made sure she saw me, but made it seem like I was simply tidying up. I began to feel uncertain and hesitant about my plan because I knew how cruel it was. I chose to wait for a day, which turned into 2 weeks later. I finally decided to call her and confront the situation. I was still undecided as to whether I wanted to seek revenge or not. I made the call and informed her that I was aware that she was seeing her supposed cousin. I could not recall his name. She initially denied it, but I mentioned that someone had told me that they had seen them kissing. Eventually, she admitted to it but claimed that it had only started that week. I asked her how she could be involved with. I then informed her that I had known for a month. She attempted to shift the blame onto me for not disclosing this information sooner and made a snarky comment. I then informed her that there was one final thing that she would really want to know. I asked her whether she recalled the alarm clock that had been sitting on the chair by my bed. I inquired as to whether she had ever considered the possibility that the alarm clock was, in fact, a surveillance device. She responded by stating that I was the one who had positioned ourselves in such a way that we were visible to her. I then asked her why she had assumed that I was facing the foot of the bed. She replied that I was, in fact, facing the foot of the bed. I then informed her that I was aware of the truth and that she was, in fact, a liar. I ended the call abruptly as I had been using a payphone. My pager began to emit a series of rapid vibrations for several hours. I then proceeded to allow a period of 30 minutes to elapse before resuming communication. My home telephone was inundated with a plethora of voicemail messages, the content of which was characterized by a series of exclamations and vocalizations which subsequently transformed into a series of threats, followed by expressions of supplication and even the proffering of bribes. This pattern was then repeated on the following day when she arrived at my residence and proceeded to knock on the door. For a minimum of an hour, I did not respond to the calls, and messages continued for several weeks. Although the frequency decreased, she continued to make several visits to my residence. However, I did not answer the door on those occasions. On one occasion, I did answer her call, but when she began inquiring about the tapes, I informed her that I was unaware of their existence. I listened to her express her distress, anguish, and entreaties. Each time she mentioned the tapes, I reiterated that I was unaware of her reference. I terminated the call and did not communicate with her further. The calls and messages eventually ceased, and I proceeded to move on with my life. To this day, she is unaware that there was never a hidden camera. The camera was merely an antiquated radio alarm clock that appeared sufficiently bulky to serve as a surveillance device, provided one was not paying close attention. I subsequently came to regret this decision, as it undoubtedly caused her significant distress over an extended period. It only took approximately 6 months for me to recover from my emotional trauma. Let us begin by introducing the primary individuals involved, myself and my former partner. The wife identified Target 1 as her husband and Target 2 as her former partner's ex-girlfriend. My wife, Maria, was my partner in the revenge plan. My daughter, Sarah, and my friend, Jason, were also involved. Jason and I were accomplices in the revenge. With that information now provided, it is necessary to present some background information. My marriage to Pepper was turbulent. In retrospect, I was deeply in love with her. However, I have come to realize that she was more interested in the money and convenience I provided before we got married. I had a son named Bob who has always displayed a proclivity for pharmaceuticals, and I had another son, whose name I will not divulge, whom I had full custody of during our marriage. Sarah was born. I attempted to salvage the marriage, but ultimately, we were unable to sustain it. Consequently, we opted for a separation, and due to my occupation, which entailed some travel, and my custody of my son, I relocated to my hometown. I relocated to my hometown in another state, thus enabling my parents to provide assistance. However, I also retained an apartment in the town where Pepper and Sarah resided, allowing me to spend as much time as possible with my daughter. I consulted with my close friend, Jason, who is a lawyer with his own firm, and requested that he draft a child support agreement for us. It is essential to note that the agreement exclusively addressed child support, excluding matters of custody, visitation, and other related issues. This arrangement was maintained for approximately a year. I resided with Sarah for a month while my parents assumed responsibility for my other son, and then I resided with my son for a similar duration. However, financial constraints eventually made it untenable to maintain 2 households. Additionally, Pepper expressed a desire to relocate. She relocated to her hometown, which was in a different state but closer to where I lived. Consequently, I gave up the apartment, and she made the move. We continued in this new situation for a couple more years. Despite remaining friendly and even attempting to reconcile our relationship on a few occasions, it never worked out. I still had deep feelings for her, but we were unable to agree on important matters, such as the decision of where to live was a significant challenge. I had to push myself to move on, so I started dating. On the other hand, she had been dating almost immediately after I moved out, although I still loved her. Our relationship transitioned more into that of good friends rather than husband and wife. Eventually, she met Steve. I was not given much information about him except that he was a certified ethical hacker. His profession became a significant factor later on during their relationship. She would send me messages about their dates, even sending me a text on the day they first became close. This caused me considerable distress, and in hindsight, I believe this was her intention. However, I attempted to act as a supportive friend and confidant. Out of the blue, Pepper informed me that she and Steve had broken up after 6 months of she began dating and soon realized her feelings for me were more profound than she had initially acknowledged. As the summer season commenced, she relocated to my state. Our plan was for them to spend the summer with me, allowing them to ascertain whether they wished to remain here permanently. I can confirm that we had an extremely enjoyable summer together. All the children got along well, and even Bob enjoyed being here. Consequently, Pepper declared that we were back together and that they were moving in with me. We proceeded to register my daughter for school, and she even joined a Pee Wee cheerleading team for the summer. She had formed close friendships and was thoroughly enjoying her time in the area. However, she still retained possession of her former apartment, which was furnished and contained numerous personal belongings. I offered to assist with the relocation of these items, but she and her partner, Bob, were confident in their ability to manage the task independently. Consequently, they began the process of packing their belongings and preparing for their new residence. As you can imagine, the transition did not proceed as smoothly as anticipated. After just 3 days, Pepper made a surprising announcement. She declared that she would not tolerate any further delays or complications. She informed me that she would not be moving and that she and Steve were in love and planning to live together. I was profoundly distressed by this turn of events. I was unable to comprehend the rationale behind her decision. The most distressing aspect was that she left it to me to break the heartbreaking news to Sarah. When I informed her of the news, I saw a profound change in Sarah's demeanor, which transformed my feelings of hurt into anger. Then, Sarah broke down and began pleading with me to stay with her. She proceeded to reveal details about how her mother would leave with Steve for days, leaving Bob in charge. At the age of 8, she was compelled to learn how to cook for herself due to her father's proclivity for spending money on illicit substances. Consequently, her mother was frequently left in charge, relying on her niece, who had multiple felony convictions, to care for Sarah. Additionally, Sarah recounted the first time she met Steve. He arrived at their residence, exchanged a brief greeting, and then proceeded to engage in intimate behavior with her mother in the bedroom. Sarah, who was present outside the door, was inconsolably distraught, yet her distress was entirely disregarded by her parents. This pattern continued on numerous occasions. One year my older daughter learned about the nature of close relationships and the associated emotional dynamics, even after the traumatic experiences she endured. I was enraged, and I informed Pepper that I would not allow Sarah to return to that situation. I was prepared to fight for my daughter's well-being. In response, Pepper took immediate action and arranged for an emergency hearing. The state was attempting to compel Sarah to return. I was compelled to act expeditiously, but I was able to secure legal counsel and, fortuitously, prevailed in the hearing, despite Pepper's tardiness and assertion of a disability. The judge concurred that, in the absence of a custody agreement and in light of the troubling allegations, it was in Sarah's best interest to remain with me for the time being. I had emerged triumphant in the initial skirmish, but this victory proved ephemeral. Following the hearing, my inbox was inundated with phishing emails and texts. Additionally, I began to receive password reset requests and multi-factor authentication codes for various accounts. Factor authentication codes from my bank, Facebook, Reddit, and other accounts indicated with certainty that Steve was the perpetrator of these malevolent actions. The following day, Jason contacted me with disconcerting information. His law firm's website, email, and phone accounts had been compromised. He was obliged to report the incident to the court and was engaged in a high-profile case. The FBI became involved. To describe my feelings as anything other than furious would be an understatement. These two individuals had not only caused me significant distress but also harmed my daughter and tarnished the reputation of a lifelong friend. It was time for them to face the consequences, and I was determined to make them pay dearly. I devoted hours to researching Stephen and Pepper's backgrounds, searching for any. I was able to uncover a significant amount of incriminating information about Pepper. I discovered social media posts of her staying out late, drinking, which correlated with Sarah's absences and tardiness at school. I also found numerous pictures of her engaging in enjoyable activities with two unfamiliar children. Furthermore, I was able to locate neighbors who were willing to testify that Sarah had to beg for food because it was evident that Pepper was frequently left in the care of either Bob or the individual with a criminal record. In contrast, Steve had taken additional measures to secure his accounts, making it challenging for me to uncover any information that could be used against him. This situation was becoming increasingly frustrating. Then, I had a sudden realization: I should check his LinkedIn profile. My intuition proved to be accurate. While there was not a substantial amount of information on his profile, I managed to locate Maria, his former spouse. Through his professional connections, I made contact with Maria, who was happy to accept my invitation to speak. Maria and I quickly established a close rapport. She held strong negative views of Pepper, which were well-founded given their shared history of child abandonment. I gained valuable insights from Maria, which I will now summarize. Maria and Steve had recently divorced. In the custody agreement, Steve relinquished the family home, vehicle, bank account and the majority of savings, while retaining responsibility for child support payments. Maria was willing to relinquish the financial resources in exchange for assuming control and ensuring the safety of her children. They had a comprehensive custody agreement with clear stipulations for Steve to adhere to. In the event of any violation, he would face significant repercussions, as outlined in the agreement. He would be required to sell the house and divide the proceeds with Maria. Additionally, his child support payments would increase substantially, potentially leading to financial instability. It is noteworthy that Steve had not blocked Maria on social media and continued to send her messages, often boasting about his supposedly improved circumstances without her. Many of these messages included images of Pepper Marie. I shared my findings with I and we collaborated to develop a plan of action. It was time for retribution. I formed an alliance with Jason, who informed the FBI investigator about the hacking attempts I had experienced. We suspected it was the same perpetrator. The individual responsible was swiftly identified by the investigator, who then requested that I share the entirety of the information I had gathered, along with my suspicions regarding the perpetrator. In response, the investigator posed an intriguing question: did I possess knowledge regarding Steve's place of employment? In fact, I did, due to information provided by Maria. It subsequently became evident that Steve was not as proficient in hacking as he had assumed. The FBI had already traced the hacking incident involving Jason back to a company that was, in fact, the same company where once the conversation with the FBI had concluded, I promptly contacted Steve's workplace to file a complaint. I informed the manager that an individual was attempting to gain unauthorized access to my accounts and expressed my conviction that the perpetrator was Steve. However, the manager did not take my allegations seriously, likely due to a lack of concrete evidence. They were soon to be proven wrong, as the following week brought a visit from a special agent. The situation constituted a significant challenge for Steve and Pepper. Pepper received the divorce papers and her lawyer was presented with all the evidence I had gathered. According to my lawyer, it was the most comprehensive investigation he had ever seen. I had concrete proof of 40 instances of tardiness and 19 absences, all linked to nights out drinking with Steve. I had also obtained undeniable evidence of them abandoning my daughter for extended periods of time. Maria even provided me with a photo. Photographic evidence, taken at 2 a.m. on the night preceding the emergency hearing, depicted Steve and Pepper consuming alcohol at a tattoo parlor. At the hearing, Pepper arrived late and asserted that he was unable to attend due to a disability. Steve was served with the notification that he had violated the terms of the entire custody agreement. Maria presented evidence, obtained from me, that proved he was with Pepper on nights when the children were supposed to be with him and were left unsupervised. Additionally, she had evidence of unauthorized contact between Steve and Pepper, which contravened the terms of the custody agreement, had significant consequences. Steve lost his employment as a result of my complaint, along with an older hacking complaint involving the FBI. His employers were compelled to terminate his employment as they could not directly link the hacking to him. The reason for his dismissal became widely known, making it challenging for him to secure alternative employment. As a result of the aforementioned circumstances, he was compelled to sell the family home, liquidate his investments and bank accounts, and provide half of the proceeds to Maria, given that he was no longer in a position to generate an income. His child support payments remained unchanged. The last I heard, he was employed at a grocery store, resulting in a significant reduction in his income from over $200,000 a year to less than $40,000. Pepper experienced considerable challenges during the divorce proceedings. The judge ruled in my favor on every issue, and I was granted sole custody of Sarah. Furthermore, the court granted the authority to make all decisions regarding Sarah to Pepper. Additionally, Pepper was ordered to attend counseling, and her visits with Sarah and Bob must be supervised by a neutral third party, with the expenses covered by Pepper. Notably, Sarah is making significant progress. Despite still requiring counseling, she is excelling in school and has made numerous friends. Additionally, she does not see her mother often, but it is evident that she is much happier and better off without her.